It's September 16, 2019, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1, member of Congress stands up for right to lend guns to friends who can't pass background checks. Remember this asshole? This is Dan Crenshaw, Republican member of Congress representing Texas's 2nd District. Pete Davidson made fun of him on Saturday Night Live. Then some of Crenshaw's fellow Republicans complained, and SNL invited Crenshaw on the air so Davidson could apologize and do some half-assed feel-good desk piece because God forbid a racist right-winger, which incidentally is what Dan Crenshaw is, gets his feelings hurt by some lukewarm political humor. Trans people get belittled by trolls and stand-up comics endlessly making the same shitty joke? Hey, they just need to toughen up. A former Navy SEAL who supports Trump, opposes taking action to combat climate change, and was once an administrator in a Facebook group filled with white supremacists and conspiracy theorists takes a few admittedly tasteless zingers for having an eye patch? For shame! It's the death of civility! What have we become? Anyway, went off on a tangent there. That all happened a while ago. The reason I'm talking about Crenshaw now is this tweet he sent out week before last. He retweeted the story of a woman who was attacked by 5 men and was able to fight them off with help from the handgun she was carrying. Crenshaw retweeted the story along with this comment, quote, "Situations like this story are why we protect the Second Amendment. Side note, with universal background checks, I wouldn't be able to let my friends borrow my handgun when they travel alone like this. We would make felons out of people just for defending themselves." No, we would make felons out of people just for carrying firearms that they aren't allowed to have. There's a lot more to unpack here, so let's go a step at a time. Crenshaw, a member of the United States Congress, is apparently admitting, 1, to letting his friends borrow his guns, and not just to go hunting over the weekend or something, but to travel with, and 2, that these friends he's lending his guns to couldn't pass background checks. Crenshaw's fellow member of Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, pointed this out when she tweeted, quote, "You are a member of Congress. Why are you lending guns to people unsupervised who can't pass a background check? The people you're giving a gun to have likely abused their spouse or have a violent criminal record, and you may not know it. Why on earth would you do that?" To which Crenshaw responded, "Just so I'm clear, you think my friends are domestic abusers, criminals? Seriously, that's your argument, that they can't pass a background check? That's your argument, dipshit! You said that universal background checks would prevent you from letting your friends borrow your guns. Why do people fail background checks, Dan?" Later, Crenshaw tweeted, quote, "I'm just happy I was able to tell the far-left bubble that normal, law-abiding Americans in the middle of the country sometimes lend their guns to friends. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell them that we also, wait for it, read the Bible." Ha ha ha, you silly East Coast liberals getting all bent out of shape because I, a member of Congress, regularly let my friends who can't pass background checks borrow my guns, when what you should really be upset about is that we all do it all the time. I mean, this is like that time when Trump was running for president and the Access Hollywood tape came out and all his supporters rushed to the front and were like, "It's okay, we all talk like that. It's so routine that we aren't remotely shocked by it. So calm down." Speaking of right-wing spaces where the outrageous and the contemptible have been fully normalized, number 2, in shocking twist, it turns out Jerry Falwell Jr. is a crook. Last week, Politico published an article based on interviews and documentation provided by 24 current and former officials at Liberty University, describing how University President Jerry Falwell Jr. has been plundering the school's vast resources to benefit himself and his family and friends. One of the anonymous sources quoted in the article, described as a senior university official with knowledge of the school's finances, describes it this way: "We're not a school, we're a real estate hedge fund." So it's a school in the same way Trump University was a school. Makes sense, given what an unapologetic Trump supporter Falwell has been these last few years. The article details how tuition collected from the school's growing number of online students has been used to support real estate projects from which Falwell and his children stand to personally benefit. Many of the school's real estate properties are managed by a private company owned by Falwell's son. The article also makes it clear that it's difficult to determine exactly where Falwell's personal assets end and those belonging to the school begin. All of this is fascinating and damning and not so very surprising, but to me, the most interesting thing about this Politico article is how many of the people quoted in it speak fondly of Falwell's father, the late Jerry Falwell Sr., one of the most loathsome and destructive human beings of the last half-century of American history. Falwell Sr. founded the Moral Majority, which fused fundamentalist Christianity with the Republican Party. He was an outspoken racist and homophobe who opposed integration, supported apartheid, and infamously claimed the 9/11 attacks were God's judgment brought about in part by gays and lesbians advocating for equal rights. In other words, Jerry Falwell Sr. was a piece of shit, and the world became a better place the instant he died. And yet, people who loved that horrible, hateful old bastard are turning on his son because Falwell Jr. is just that much worse. Do you have any idea how much of an asshole you have to be as a conservative for your fellow conservatives who loved Jerry goddamn Falwell to think you're an asshole? It's difficult to fathom, but the way I figure it, you'd have to be at least as big of an asshole as the legislators in this next story. Number 3. North Carolina Republicans hold vote while Democrats attend 9/11 memorials. Speaking of 9/11, the anniversary of the attacks was last week. People all over the United States marked the occasion in various ways. There were ceremonies in New York, at the Pentagon near Washington, D.C., and in the Pennsylvania field where United Flight 93 went down. There was even a 9/11 parade in the town of Boonesboro, a few miles from where I live, which makes no sense. Boonesboro has no direct connection whatsoever to the 9/11 attacks. I mean, I know it was a tragedy, and none of us who were around when it happened will ever forget it. But, come on. It's been 18 years. Why are random American towns still having 9/11 parades? Did Boonesboro hold a Pearl Harbor parade in 1959? Maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't look it up. The point is, we all mark the day in our own way. My personal act of remembrance is to listen to Bruce Springsteen's My City of Ruins, followed by the Lonely Island's Finest Girl Bin Laden song. Republicans in the North Carolina House of Representatives honored the lives lost on that tragic and fateful day in another way. They waited until most of their Democratic colleagues were away attending 9/11 memorials, then held a vote to override a gubernatorial veto. Everyone grieves in their own way. Who are we to judge? Democrats who were away attending the 9/11 related events say that the Republican Speaker of the House lied to them, saying there would be no votes on the morning of September the 11th. Republican Representative Jason Saine, who called for the vote while most of his Democratic colleagues were away, defended his actions, saying in a statement, quote, "As a former firefighter and an American, I am appalled that anyone in our country would stop going about their normal business on this day. When we stop being a beacon of freedom, hope, and democracy, then the terrorists win." So, wait. The terrorists win if public officials attend 9/11 memorials because they think they've got the morning off? And also, it's 9/11? Isn't attending 9/11 memorials part of the normal business of the day for a public official when the day in question is 9/11? Also, can we please retire the "then the terrorists win" argument? Look around. The current president of the United States tried to ban Muslims from the country as one of his first acts in office. Immigrants and other minority groups are openly vilified and scapegoated. Our political discourse is dominated by religious extremists and fascists. The terrorists already won. We're just too proud to admit defeat, so we took credit for their accomplishments ourselves. Number 4, Republicans in 3 states cancel presidential primaries. The Republican parties of the states of Kansas, South Carolina, and Nevada have announced that they will not hold presidential primaries for the 2020 election and will instead be committing all of their delegates to President Donald Trump. Other states are considering following suit. As a CBS News article points out, this isn't the first time this has happened. In 2004, Republican parties in 10 states canceled primaries, but there are a few key differences between the 2004 race and now. One big difference is that in 2004, President Bush was running unopposed for re-election, so the primaries were really just a formality. Trump has so far attracted 3 challengers for the 2020 election: former governor of Massachusetts Bill Weld, former Congressman Joe Walsh, and former governor of South Carolina Mark Sanford. South Carolina Republicans have one of their own running against Trump, and they still canceled their primary. I guess this is what people mean when they say Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Thinking about this story, I can't help but be reminded, yet again, for probably the 10,000th time since Trump took office, of all those moderate Republicans and centrists who assured us that there was nothing to worry about, that even if the worst things that everyone thought about Trump were true, he'd be surrounded by smarter, calmer, more sensible people who would put the good of the country, or at least the good of their party, ahead of Trump's interests and rein him in. In other words, calm down, Trump won't be running the show. Fast forward to now, where Trump is totally running the show, and the rest of the Republican Party didn't even put up a fight because all that shit about moderating influences and party loyalists standing up to him was bullshit, and everyone on both sides knew it all along. As soon as Trump won the election, the Republican Party did exactly what it was supposed to do, and it fell in line. Because for all their high-minded talk about patriotism and conservative philosophy and upholding the principles of the Constitution, the truth is, the only principle the Republican Party gives a shit about is victory. If they believe Trump can win and help them extend their corrupt and corrosive domination of the White House, Congress, and the courts, they'll stand behind him all the way no matter what he says and no matter what he does. They've proven it time and time again for over 2 years now, and these states canceling their primaries to pledge their loyalty to Trump is just the latest example of what a bunch of craven bootlickers they are. And speaking of the man the Republican Party was supposed to stand up to, but instead immediately laid down for, now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. Actually, this time around, it's even less complete than usual because I'm focusing on just 2 things. Let's start with Sharpiegate, I guess. Week before last, as Hurricane Dorian was approaching the mainland, Trump tweeted, "In addition to Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama will most likely be hit much harder than anticipated." The problem is, that wasn't true. There had been a forecast from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that predicted Dorian might hit a small part of Alabama, but it was 2 days out of date when Trump posted his tweet. By the time Trump tweeted, the forecast had been updated, and Alabama was no longer considered in danger. Without mentioning Trump by name, the National Weather Service's Birmingham, Alabama office subsequently tweeted this correction. Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian will be felt across Alabama. The system will remain too far east. So, instead of doing the responsible, adult thing, admitting his tweet had been based on old information, and using his platform as President of the United States to make sure the latest, most accurate forecast was shared to his social media followers and whoever else happened to see or hear him, Trump doubled down on his original tweet and continued to insist that there was a chance Dorian would hit Alabama. He repeatedly lied to the media and to employees of FEMA, claiming that he had seen new information indicating Alabama would be affected by the hurricane, when there was no such information, and the updated forecasts continued to show just the opposite of what Trump was saying. 3 days after his original false tweet, Trump presented a printout of an NOAA forecast map showing the likely path of Dorian and the area that could be impacted by the storm. The potential track area, which predicted where the storm was likely to go 4 to 5 days after the date the forecast was made, had been crudely enlarged using a black marker to encompass the southeastern corner of Alabama. So, let's pause and examine this a bit more closely, because I feel this incident illustrates, wow, a lot of the things that are wrong and bad and embarrassing and deeply, deeply troubling about President Trump. First, he shares a weather forecast that is 2 days out of date and inaccurate. He digs in his heels and lies repeatedly to insist he was right. Then, several days later, he shows an official forecast map that is now even more out of date than the one he shared initially, and alters it to make his original wrong tweet look accurate and reasonable. But when he alters it, he doesn't have someone at the White House extend the hurricane's path in Photoshop, or at least get a white marker to draw his pathetic little half circle of shame on the end of the real potential track area. He alters the map in the most obvious, half-assed, why even bother way possible. As though it doesn't matter that it's immediately apparent he tampered with the map, the mere fact that he put Sharpie to poster board and drew on that extra loop into Alabama makes it true. He's like an accountant who tried to doctor the books of a failing business by just scratching out the total at the bottom of the ledger and writing in a bigger number in a different color of ink. Who the hell does he think he's kidding? And why are so many goddamn people still humoring this clueless, bumbling egomaniac and acting like it's a totally normal and acceptable state of affairs to have him in charge? And finally, to pick up a thread from a bit earlier, Trump had to cancel some of his 9/11 related plans, specifically the secret Camp David meeting he'd planned with leaders of the Taliban. Apparently, the secret meeting was scrapped just as the Taliban leaders were about to leave for the US when the Taliban took credit for a terrorist attack in Kabul that killed 12 people, including an American soldier. When Trump tweeted the news of the cancellation of the meeting, he wondered, quote, "What kind of people would kill so many in order to seemingly strengthen their bargaining position? I don't know, maybe the kind of people who would join the Taliban? Rumor has it they've been involved in some killings in the past." Also us. We're the kind of people who would kill in order to strengthen our bargaining position. Just in case that's unclear. We don't call it jihad, we call it foreign policy, but the results are pretty much the same. That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please click like and share the video and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to continue making videos like this one and like all the videos I make on this channel by supporting this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel for as little as $1 a month. And believe me, those $1 a month pledges really add up and help me out like you would not believe. But if you can afford it, and you think I'm worth it, and you pledge $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like my newest $5 or more per month patron, and his name is Brian Schmidt. Thank you, Brian, so much for becoming a patron at $5 per month or higher. And thanks to all of you who are patrons at whatever level you're pledging, however long you've been a patron of mine. I could not do this without my Patreon supporters. So I thank you so much for allowing me to have this job, to do this work that means something to me and hopefully means something to you as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.